In 2003, 8 in 10 Britons trusted BBC journalists to tell them the truth. By 2023, that figure was 38%. The BBC survived that collapse. But what didn't survive was the shared national conversation where Britain talked to itself every evening. Reith wanted to inform, educate, and entertain. Somewhere along the way, we just stopped watching. This is how the BBC stopped being ours. Remember Saturday evenings in 1975? Doctor Who at 6:30. Michael Parkinson interviewing Muhammad Ali at 10. And between them, 2 hours of light entertainment that made sense, precisely because everyone watched the same thing. Monday morning at work, you'd all seen Morecambe and Wise. Your neighbour had watched the Generation Game. The whole country moved through the week together, unified not by what we believed, but by what we'd all witnessed Saturday night. Only 3 channels existed: BBC One, BBC Two, ITV. That limitation created something we didn't appreciate until it vanished. With such few choices, each broadcaster invested massively in programs because they knew millions would watch. The BBC wasn't trying to be everything. It just was everything. News you could trust, dramas that pushed boundaries, documentaries that educated a generation, comedy that reflected Britain back at itself. Lord Reith, who built the BBC in the 1920s and 30s, established a mission that guided programming for decades. Inform, educate, entertain, in that order. Not entertain first and hope some education slips through. Information came first. The BBC was your wireless set during the war. Your television newsreader speaking truth to power. Your documentary presenter explaining how the universe worked. Trust wasn't earned. Trust was simply assumed. The Golden Age, the period critics point to when condemning modern television, ran roughly from 1965 to 1975. Hugh Carlton Green, Director General from 60 to 69, broke the BBC out of its comfortable establishment role. He commissioned That Was the Week That Was, political satire broadcast live on Saturday evenings that horrified politicians and delighted millions. Cabinet ministers telephoned complaints. The Prime Minister objected. Green didn't care. The show ran because challenging power was precisely what public service broadcasting meant. The Wednesday play brought Ken Loach and Dennis Potter to millions. Cathy Come Home in '66 showed homelessness with such raw honesty that Parliament debated housing policy the following week. Up the Junction tackled abortion before the law changed. Z-Cars showed working-class police in northern towns dealing with domestic violence and poverty, not genteel murders in country houses. Plays for Today continued through the 70s, 90-minute dramas broadcast during prime time that asked Britain to look at itself honestly. This wasn't safe programming, plays that made people uncomfortable, documentaries that asked difficult questions about power and privilege, drama that reflected working-class life without condescension. But you watched because there were only 3 channels, and the BBC was one of them. Kenneth Clark's Civilization in '69 taught art history to the masses, with such elegance that millions who'd never visited a gallery understood the Renaissance. Jacob Bronowski's The Ascent of Man in '73 explained human evolution and scientific progress across 13 weeks. David Attenborough's Life on Earth in '79 brought natural history into living rooms across Britain with patience and wonder we've forgotten how to feel. 13-part series broadcast weekly, requiring attention and commitment we can barely imagine now. No streaming, no catching up. You watched when it aired or you missed it. Saturday evening was ritual. Doctor Who for the children, then The Generation Game, The Two Ronnies, Morecambe and Wise. Comedy that wasn't edgy or controversial, just funny, in ways that made sense to everyone from dockers to doctors. The Morecambe and Wise Christmas special in '77 drew 28 million viewers, more than half the country. Not recording it for later, not streaming it whenever convenient. Sitting together, watching together, laughing together at precisely the same moment. ITV provided competition that kept standards high rather than driving them down. BBC pushed boundaries. ITV responded with armchair theatre and World in Action. Neither could relax because the other was always creating something brilliant. The comfortable duopoly, as it became known. BBC funded by license fee, ITV by advertising. Both making programs that lasted because quality mattered more than quarterly profits. But here's what we didn't realize at the time. The BBC was destroying its own history even as it created new masterpieces. No official archiving policy existed until 1978. Videotape was expensive, storage was limited, so the BBC wiped recordings to reuse the tapes, erased them, destroyed them permanently. Most of Top of the Pops before 1976, gone. The Beatles performing in '66, wiped. Hundreds of performances by bands who defined British music, lost because someone needed to reuse the tape. The Madhouse on Castle Street, a '63 teleplay featuring Bob Dylan before he became famous, wiped in '68 after Dylan's fame could have made it valuable. Someone at the BBC looked at a program featuring the most influential musician of the generation and decided the tape was worth more than the recording. Most of Till Death Us Do Part. The sitcom America adapted as All in the Family, lost forever. Peter Cook and Dudley Moore created not only, but also brilliant sketch comedy that influenced everyone from Monty Python to every alternative comedian who followed. Cook offered to buy the master tapes himself. He wanted to preserve his own work. The BBC said no. BBC property. BBC decision. Then they wiped them anyway. 22 episodes survive only because other broadcasters kept their copies. The rest destroyed. Terry Gilliam bought the Monty Python tapes personally, rescuing them before the BBC could continue their destruction. Only his intervention saved Python's flying circus. Most of the Likely Lads, groundbreaking working-class comedy from the '60s, exist now only in fragments. 20 episodes made, 10 survive. Priceless cultural heritage reduced to random fragments scattered across foreign archives because someone at Broadcasting House needed to reuse a tape. This wasn't malice, just bureaucratic indifference to history. The BBC made television, for now, for tonight's broadcast, not for archives or future generations. No one considered that these programs might matter decades later. They were just entertainment, disposable, replaceable. That attitude, that casual destruction of Britain's cultural memory, foreshadowed what would come. An institution that doesn't value its own past won't protect its future. The comfortable world ended in 1990 when Sky B, Rupert Murdoch's satellite service, broke ITV's advertising monopoly. Suddenly, dozens of channels competed for viewers and revenue. The structure that created quality television, few channels with massive budgets and guaranteed audiences, crumbled. BBC and ITV could no longer assume viewers had nowhere else to go. John Burr arrived as Director General in '92 with McKinsey Consultants and Management Theory. He introduced producer choice, an internal market where BBC departments charged each other for services. Camera crews became cost centers. Editing suites had hourly rates. Producers spent time on paperwork instead of programs. The whole elegant ecosystem of creators making television became a bureaucratic exercise in cost accounting. Quality mattered less than efficiency. Creativity became expensive. Risk became liability. Management consultants replaced program makers in positions of power. People who'd never created anything judged those who did by spreadsheets and revenue projections. The BBC was becoming corporate, professional, efficient. And somewhere in that transformation, soul leaked away. Political pressure intensified through the 2000s. The Hutton Inquiry in 2003, examining BBC reporting about Iraq weapons of mass destruction claims, ended with government pressure that forced resignations and damaged credibility. The BBC had challenged authority. Authority pushed back. The message received throughout the organization was clear. Be careful, don't make waves. Avoid controversy that matters. Then came the competition scandals. In 2008, Ofcom fined the BBC £400,000 for 8 separate breaches of broadcasting codes. The BBC had faked winners in competitions, deliberately conducted competitions unfairly. Blue Peter, a children's programme that represented wholesome British values, falsified competition results. Trust, the one thing the BBC couldn't afford to lose, was traded for convenience and laziness. Conservative governments after 2010 cut funding repeatedly. Licence fee frozen. BBC forced to absorb costs for providing free licences to over 75s, an expense worth hundreds of millions. In 2020, that provision ended. Pensioners who'd paid licence fees for 50 years suddenly faced bills or prosecution. The BBC didn't choose this. Government imposed it. But pensioners didn't blame government. They blamed the BBC demanding money. Meanwhile, the digital revolution was rewriting every rule about television. Netflix launched in Britain in 2012. Amazon Prime followed. YouTube became where young people watched everything. The BBC was slow. Too slow. iPlayer existed, but felt clunky compared to Netflix's seamless interface. Programs appeared late. Navigation confused users. The BBC was trying to compete in a race it didn't understand against companies that lived online. And here's the problem that would break the license fee model. You need a license to watch any live television from any broadcaster. Also, to watch BBC iPlayer on demand. But if you only watch Netflix, Disney+, YouTube, you don't need a license. Perfectly legal. The definition of television viewing changed overnight from owning a set to choosing specific content. Millions of households, particularly young people, simply stopped watching traditional broadcast television at all. Enforcement collapsed. In 2019, the BBC prosecuted those who evaded the license fee through traditional methods. Officers knocked on doors. People who admitted watching without paying faced court and fines. But by 2024, prosecutions had fallen 80%. Not 17%, 80%. Because when an enforcement officer knocks now, the household can truthfully say they watch only Netflix. No live television, no iPlayer, no license required. And the BBC can't prove otherwise without invading privacy in ways Britain won't accept. The numbers tell their own story. 26.2 million licenses in force at the peak in 2017. 23.8 million in 2024. 2.4 million households stopped paying. Not because they're criminals, because they genuinely don't need it anymore. Another 3.6 million declared they don't watch licensable content. Combined, that's £1.1 billion the BBC isn't collecting annually. More than a quarter of its license fee income vanished. Evasion rate reached 12.52% in 2024, 30-year high. But the BBC conducted 2 million enforcement visits, 50% more than before, and prosecutions kept falling. People don't answer doors, or they answer and tell truth. They watch YouTube, they stream Netflix, they're not lying. The world genuinely changed. And while the funding model collapsed and viewer habits transformed, something more fundamental broke. Trust, political trust. In 2012, Conservative voters gave the BBC a net approval rating of +3. Labour voters +23. By 2023, Conservative voters rated the BBC at -38. 41-point drop. Labour voters fell to +2. Only Liberal Democrat voters still trusted it. 45% of all Britons now see the BBC as biased toward one of the two major parties. Brexit shattered any remaining consensus. Leave voters accused the BBC of metropolitan Remain bias. Remain voters saw it as giving too much airtime to Farage and Johnson. Both sides were angry. Both sides were convinced the BBC opposed them specifically. When everyone thinks you're biased against them, perhaps you're trying for balance. Or perhaps you've lost the ability to speak to anyone coherently. Working-class provincial audiences who trusted the BBC for generations turned away. Only 37% of C2DE households trust BBC News, compared to 49% of ABC One households. The broadcaster that claimed to serve everyone was losing exactly the audiences Reith wanted to reach. The masses weren't watching Morecambe and Wise together anymore. They were watching YouTube conspiracy theories, or Love Island, or nothing at all. Young people left entirely. 16 to 24s still use BBC News more than any other single source, 59% weekly. But that's down massively from previous generations and declining further every year. They don't watch television. They watch creators on YouTube, shows on Netflix, clips on TikTok. The idea of appointment television, sitting down at 8 o'clock because something's starting, makes no sense to them. They consume content when they want, where they want, how they want. And nothing the BBC produces feels made for their world. In November 2024, Director General Tim Davie and News Chief Deborah Turnus both resigned following scandal. BBC Panorama had edited footage of Donald Trump to misrepresent his role in Capitol riots. Not accidentally, deliberately, to make him look worse. When exposed, the damage was catastrophic. Because once trust dies, it dies completely. Viewers who wanted to believe in BBC impartiality couldn't anymore. Those who already distrusted the corporation felt vindicated. So, where does this leave Britain's national broadcaster in 2026? Financially, still standing. £3.8 billion collected annually. Enormous resources, employing thousands. Making programmes that win awards. But something's missing. That sense of shared national ownership. The feeling that the BBC belongs to us, speaks for us, reflects us back to ourselves. Walk into any pub and mention the BBC. You'll get opinions, strong opinions, few positive. Too woke, say those on the right. Too establishment, say those on the left. Too London-centric, too metropolitan, too middle class, too safe, too boring. Everyone has complaints, nobody has faith. And perhaps that's inevitable. Perhaps the world that created BBC's golden age, 3 channels and captive audiences, could never survive in an era of infinite choice and algorithmic feeds. Perhaps trying to please everyone means pleasing nobody. Perhaps public service broadcasting was only possible in that brief window when technology was limited and audiences were unified by necessity rather than choice. The tragedy isn't that the BBC failed to adapt. In many ways, it did adapt. iPlayer works now. Online content is vast. Resources remain enormous. The tragedy is that adaptation required losing the thing that made it matter. That sense of trust. That shared national conversation. Those Saturday evenings when everyone watched the same thing, and Monday morning everyone talked about it. You can't adapt to a fragmented world without fragmenting yourself. We fragmented. Into algorithms that show us what we already think. Into platforms that confirm our existing biases. Into bubbles where we only hear voices that sound like ours. The BBC couldn't hold us together anymore because nothing could hold us together. The technology that promised connection delivered isolation. Choice became prison. Freedom from schedule became slavery to endless scroll. Appointment television became appointment with algorithms. And the BBC, professional and efficient and thoroughly modern, survives as just another option in an infinite menu. Still making programs, still broadcasting news, still funded by license fee for now, though that future looks increasingly uncertain, but not special anymore. Not ours anymore. Not the voice of Britain speaking to itself anymore. Just another channel most people don't watch, competing for attention against platforms designed by Silicon Valley psychologists to be addictive. Those Saturday evenings are gone. That trust is broken. That shared experience, where the whole country moved through the week together, unified by television ritual rather than divided by political algorithms, vanished into streaming services and social media feeds. The BBC lost its soul not through scandal or failure, but through success at surviving in a world where souls became liability and efficiency replaced magic. Where trust became impossible because everyone's reality is different now. The license fee will probably go eventually, replaced by subscription or advertising or direct taxation or something we haven't imagined yet. And when it does, something will die that was already mostly dead. Not the BBC. The BBC will adapt again, become something else again, survive again. What dies is the idea itself. The idea that Britain could have one voice it trusted, one source of truth everyone shared. One Saturday evening, everyone watched together. Somewhere in an archive, assuming they didn't wipe it, there's Morecambe and Wise making 28 million people laugh at exactly the same moment. Eric and Ernie in perfect rhythm, bringing the whole country together without trying to please everyone, just by being brilliant at what they did. A reminder of unity we'll never see again. The Britain we remember, the one that watched together. The one where we still believe the box in the corner told us truth. The one where Saturday night meant something because everyone experienced it together. Do you remember when you trusted the BBC? When Saturday night meant watching the same thing as everyone else? Drop your memories in the comments below. And if this reminded you of a Britain that made more sense, hit that subscribe button for more stories from the country we've lost.